Hey everybody. How we doing? Oh dear. Gotta log in. No, don't make me log in. To see the chat. I gotta look up all of my data for that. Ah, jeez. Okay. Yeah, I'll be able to see the chat in just a second, folks. Morning, everybody. Click all the things that include traffic lights, and it's one of those really long views. Okay, vehicles, I can do that.
Hotel in Chicago. And first of all, one of Irving Berlin's greatest hits, Blue Skies.
It really wants me to go through a lot of click all the squares with crap. There we go. Okay. Hey, Nancy. Hey, Jenny. Hey, Joanne. There we go. Joanne, thanks for staying up another hour. Hey, Sarah. Hey, Ann and Susan. Hey, Casey. Hey, good or I guess to you, Audrey. Hey, Lorena. Hey, Dina. Hey, Carolina in Poland over there on YouTube. Hey, Heather and Melissa and Becky. Now, that capture one is like right on the line and you can't quite tell if the crosswalk extends into the next picture or not. Ah! Hey, Tony. Hey, Bridget. Hey, Georgia and Jackie. Hey, Mary Jo. Hey, Terry and Miguel. Hey, Betsy. Hey, Octavio. Yeah, Joe, I haven't got to hit the Chicago hens yet. I might try to get it this week, though. If I'm up in time and all that. Hey, Bruce. Hey, Marita. Hey, Sari. Is it the Equinox Bella? I tend to miss those days. Hey, Stacy. Morning, Ava. Gail, I'm kind of waiting right now to hear if I have to go to LA in 2 weekends before I book a walking tour. But it might be first weekend of April. I'm just waiting to hear if I have to go film some Netflix stuff. Hey, Dad. Hey, Aaron, happy birthday. Morning, Scott. Hey, Steve. Hey, Kathy and Lisa and Cynthia. I think it is going to be warmer today, so it's a logical day for first day of spring. Hey, Mary Rose. Morning, Kyle. Hello to everybody. See if any of these hundreds of thousands of people apparently watching me on TikTok click the link in bio and show up. I don't know if that actually leads to anything new on TikTok. It's just a dopamine rush. But boy, I'm getting some fun comments on my boat tour clip. Hey, Mom. Hey, Patricia. Lisa, that's cool. I just put up one about the Dews Mansion in Santo Pietro, the guy who eventually married Vanna White. It got a lot more views than I expected this morning. But yeah, the Trump one is still getting people picking fights. Telling me I have Trump derangement syndrome, etc. Like it's still 2016. Hey, Nancy. Say I love you dearly, or I am yours. Chris, I'm pretty good at not listening to those guys. My favorite was the guy saying, well, I bet he's drinking 42 right now while you're working for scraps on boat tours, huh, bud? Like, yeah, he's eating well-done steak with ketchup in Florida and hanging out with Lindsey Graham this week. You think I envy him? Hey, Carol. Octavio, yes I am on History Channel tomorrow night on I Was There. I have no idea how that's going to turn out. I know they decided not to use me as the host of the show in the end. Nancy, that's odd. You can also just hit me up on Venmo or PayPal or something. Or you don't really need a ticket at all. Oh, why, Rebecca, I am surprised. Naughty at the Aragon? I remember watching Green Day live from the Aragon when I was about 14. And they were still brand new. Hey, Steven.
Goodman goes way back and gets a lot of rhythm out of Walk, Jenny, Walk.
Happy Sunday to you, Laura. Today's the solstice. The only day anybody thinks to try balancing eggs. Morning, Phoenix. Ah, the Birds, that would have been a good show. If it was one of their good nights. Which they didn't always have. I've seen Dylan there. Who else have I seen at the Aragon? I haven't been to the Aragon for too much. Hey, Jeff. More often at the Rib down the block. Hey, Diane. Morning, Molly. Hey, Amy. Hey, Kim. Hey, Edwina. Hey, Christy. Glad to hear about the dog. Hey, Alicia, and hey, Grandma Belle. Hey, Kristen. I love all these people commenting, tell me the name of your tour company so I can make sure not to go. I was like, link is in the bio. Hey, Grace. The Aragon Ballroom, designed by Boyd Hill, one of the lesser-known architects at Graceland. At least I managed to find him kind of by accident. I was looking up somebody else in his plot when there was a little note in the file mentioning that he was an architect.
They all loved those bastards when they played by Benny Goodman. And now another one just in the same vein, Rosetta.
Sheep food district, that sounds interesting. Though it occurs to me I have no idea what sheep eat. Hey, Patty. Hey, Todd. Morning, Scott. Hey, Cheryl. We'll let Benny Goodman finish out this song before we get started properly here. Hey, Shannon. Yeah, this is our usual Benny Goodman live at the Congress Hotel in 1936. Oh yeah, I should have some breakfast too. Come to think of it. I slept in late for me, and it's just kind of spent the whole morning booking, setting up the next couple of weeks' tours, etc. Morning, Susan. Setting up next week's tours, relearning the parts of this one that I might have slipped my mind over time. Michael, this music comes from archive.org. This is Benny on the Camel Caravan show, though they leave out the ads for Camel cigarettes, which is nice. Hey, Amy. Sorry you can't hear.
Music by Benny Goodman is being presented from the Joseph Urban Room of the Congress Hotel in downtown Chicago. And now Benny Goodman's arrangement of The Bugle Call Rang.
All right, that's Benny Goodman live at the Congress Hotel in downtown Chicago back in January of 36. And it's a few minutes after 10 o'clock. I think it's time we go ahead and get started. So welcome along, everybody. I'm Adam Seltzer from Mysterious Chicago Tours. I've been a tour guide and historian here in Chicago for going on 20 years now. I'm on the History Channel and the Travel Channel all the time, including tomorrow night on the show I Was There on the History Channel. I did some talking head work for that. Books include Mysterious Chicago, the book, Ghosts of Chicago, Flickering Empire, How Chicago Invented the U.S. Film Industry, the brand new Murder Maps USA, which came out just a few months ago, and the Graceland Cemetery book that will be out in August from University of Illinois Press. So I am incredibly famous. You should definitely pay attention. I'm TikTok famous now, too. My TikTok is same name as the Venmo there, Adam Chicago. Particularly blowing up for my old, next weekend we're doing the virtual boat tour, so I'll get to once again do my line when we go past the big silver building at 401 Wabash, which has really got some amusing comments on TikTok the last week. That's okay. People ought to know what they're getting into if they start following me. So today we're going to be talking about Uptown, cool stories from the neighborhood of Uptown. That's the neighborhood just above Wrigley Field here in Chicago, just above Lakeview and Wrigleyville, including places like Graceland Cemetery, where I am all the time. So let's go ahead and start. Just kind of adjacent on Kenmore to Graceland Cemetery is this terrific old house. 1891, kind of merging the Queen Anne and Tudor styles that were popular at the time. This is not only a cool house, it's also a real landmark architect. This was designed by William LeBaron Jenney. Now, William LeBaron Jenney is the architect who developed the home insurance building downtown a few years before he did this house. That's kind of known these days because it's generally considered the first modern skyscraper. It was the first one built with steel frame construction that allowed buildings to get taller and taller and taller than they had ever been before. He's also now interred, or his ashes are scattered, just over behind the backyard at Graceland Cemetery, where he also designed the bench for the Lion family. Now, as to the story of the house itself, it gets a little bit odd. In the 1940s, all of a sudden it was just being used as an office for a guy who ran a place up in Traverse City, Michigan. It was a little resort. Well, here's the really odd The really odd ad that he placed. Why be fussy? We offer less than any other resort in Michigan. Send us the people you hate. We'll make 'em miserable. We have leaky boats, balky riding horses, a stony beach where the water is always cold, lousy meals because we won't hire a good cook. The cherries used in our famous cherry pies are guaranteed to contain the biggest worms in the state. We're located 17 miles north of Traverse City near the end of a peninsula. It's absolutely boring. Mosquitoes the size of P-80 stage a blitz every night at 10. A terrible time is assured. For a nauseating vacation like this, you must pay $49 per week. Revolting, isn't it? Don't send for a folder because my spring fever is very bad because now I have to stay in Chicago on business. Sourpuss Nivinger, owner, Old Mission Inn. Sourpuss Nivinger, the manager of this place, was really Norman Nivinger. Only picture I could get of him is from back when he was working at a lifeguard up on the, I think it was the North Avenue beach. The Old Mission Inn is actually still standing up outside of Traverse City today. It doesn't look quite as nasty as he made it out to be. I guess that was just an experiment in advertising that would get people to go. I mean, it would work nowadays. I mean, the great task of the early 20th century is how do we get people to click on text? And this would probably get more clicks than just your average ad. It's worth a try anyway. Now, the place was for sale for $259 back in 1994, and even then, it's like the same thing. Sexy, now that I have your attention, 4052 North Kenmore. Restored elegance for the style-conscious buyer. Really a cool place. And because there's some real estate listings lately, it's going for a little more than $250 now. But you can actually get some good looks at the inside of this. That might even be original tile around the fireplace. A lot of the woodworking is probably real anyway. But Kenmore is a street with like one story and one cool house after another on it. So we're going to move just around across the street from here to a house with one of our more mysterious gangland deaths of 1927. So over here in this building across the street in July of 1927, the neighbors heard a shot and saw a woman running away. They busted into the place and found that breakfast had been set for 3, but nobody was there except for the dead body of a man named Michael Stopik, who had been kneeling in front of the couch with a bullet in his heart. Now, Stopik didn't live there. He lived down in like the Old Town Gold Coast area with several different women, many of whom were his girlfriend, but none of whom was his wife, who was living someplace else at the time. Dude had a lot of girlfriends. Captain Norton, Surgeon John Norton, who we can trace back to like the Holmes case, the Capone case, the Carl Wanderer case, like so many different stories, started investigating the place and found that he had a lot of connections. A lot of these women that he was dating had different stories about him. Apparently, the fight was with a guy named Henry Guardino over the affections of a woman named Billy Murphy, who is photographed here in what is perhaps the greatest picture ever published in the Chicago Daily News. And I don't know if they actually ever even published this one. It's just part of their archive. But I just love everything about this. I love the Cruella de Vil look on her face. I love her hairstyle. I love the outfit she's wearing. I love the heels. The way that she's just glaring at the camera. So Gertrude apparently was married to a guy who lived out in Joliet, but was dating Henry Guardino, was tired of him and wanted to go date Michael Stopik again. This got Guardino really mad. He lured Michael Stopik over to the house and then shot him to death. And he was never quite charged, but they did have a coroner's inquest where they brought in some of the other girlfriends, including this woman over here named Lillian Wallen, sitting on the left. Now, when she appeared, all of a sudden, this woman sat up and shouted, "She's got my dress!" Now, apparently, Lillian's other boyfriend was a police officer named Francis Sullivan, who would arrest people as bootleggers, and then while he knew that they were in jail, he would go to their house and rob them, stealing, in this case, about $900 worth of women's clothes, which he then gave to Lillian. So right in the middle of the inquest, somebody shouted out, "She's got my dress, she stole it, and I'll bet she's got my teddies on, too." She was, in fact, wearing this woman's stolen underwear at the time at the coroner's inquest. Said that they were paid for helping him out and pointing out who the bootleggers were and who he could steal from. So this turned out to be true. The clothes were given back. She was redressed and taken to a jail cell, redressed in a very plain house. But after all of this, they never did figure out exactly who killed Michael Stopik for the love of Gertrude, Billy Murphy. I just love that picture. I'm going to linger on it for a second while I take a sip of tea. Yeah, $900 in 1920s money, that is a lot of clothing, but they were also probably gorgeously custom-made things like that. So like, see, 900 bucks, that's about like, it's probably in the range of 20 grand worth of clothing today. I need to know how you'd accrue that much. And just over to the east of this, we get into one of those micro neighborhoods, Buena Park, which is really just known for its great architecture. We're going to show just a few houses on Hutchinson Street, all by the architect George Mawr, who, besides Frank Lloyd Wright, is maybe the second most famous Prairie School architect. This is one of his houses at 819 Hutchinson that's very much in the Prairie School of Architecture, emphasis on the horizontal, but lots of gorgeous lines all over the place. And then down the block from that is another George Mawr. That honestly doesn't look anything like it. Still kind of an emphasis on the horizontal. But more kind of a Manor style here. But then one of my favorites is around the corner from there. We've got this one that again merges Queen Anne with Tudor Revival, but also with a little bit of Richardsonian Romanesque with all of those exposed stones. Now this is just so different from the other one across the street, but same architect, George Mawr. I love this one. It's like a Smurf mansion. It's like where the richest hobbit you ever met lived. Let's move over to Sheridan Avenue. Still in the same general vicinity. This part of, it's Sheridan. They might call it Sheridan Park, people living here, but it's really part of Uptown. So this is 1377, or it was 1377 back in the old days. It is now 4048. Well, this place, stories about this area go back to 1907, when this place was still just a yard. This courtyard building had not been built yet. It was famous for a donkey who lived here, like famous enough that it made the news. And it became that famous because it was really, really loud and drove the neighbors crazy. There were even articles, the donkey's lay go on. Buena Park's tuneful Morning Canary continues at the old stand. I'd never heard of a donkey referred to as a morning canary before, but apparently, I don't live around enough donkeys to know how much noise they make. Apparently, they're pretty loud and obnoxious. You don't generally see donkeys in the city these days. But in the 1930, this place was the home of a gangster named Jack Costa, who was a bodyguard for Joe Aiello. Aiello worked with Bugs Moran up here on the north side, was working to blow Capone up with dynamite when he himself was shot to death. Trying to blow up Capone with dynamite just never seemed to work for anybody. But Jack Costa was living here with his girlfriend, Margaret Reardon, when one day he stepped outside and people in the apartment across from his opened fire on him and shot him down right there in the courtyard. This is another one. The whole thing was witnessed by his girlfriend, Margaret Reardon, who was with him when he was shot down. But the only clue that they could really get was breaking into the apartment that the killers had been lying in wait in. They found some lipstick on a cigarette that matched Margaret's lipstick. So she was arrested and eventually freed because really the lipstick was the only evidence they had against her, and that just wasn't really enough to convict somebody on. Well, we're on the gangster things. There's almost no place in Chicago with more gangster legends than the Green Mill. When you go into this place, they'll tell you, yeah, here was Capone's booth. When he came in here, they would start playing Rhapsody in Blue because it was his favorite song. Here's his escape tunnel. Almost none of this has any documentation whatsoever. There's, I imagine it probably did have gangland ties in the 1920s because it has been there that long, and pretty much every cocktail lounge did in those days. Originally built under the name the Green Mill Gardens, the most famous gangster story that has any kind of verification is there was a singer by the name of Joe Louis. He was taking a gig there instead of singing at a rival place where he had been working before, so a few people came at him and slashed his throat to try to keep him from ever singing again, or so the story goes. Usually they say that he was slashed up right behind this place or outside of the other place. Really, it was in his hotel room. And he started using this for publicity almost immediately. We would tell the story later, it took me months and months to learn to even open my mouth again, years until I could sing again. But really, just about a month later, he was arrested as a cabaret entertainer. Just a month later, he was held on charges of carrying concealed weapons. And within 6 months, he was back singing at the Green Mill again. So The story does seem to be true. He was definitely assaulted. He seems to have used it as a publicity stunt anyway, or at least taken advantage of it. The more orthodox version that Machine Gun Jack McGurn himself had ordered the hit came mainly from his biography, The Joker is Wild, from 1957. Just combing through this, I'm not a big Lewis expert or anything, but I do know about the basic timeline of Chicago gangland stuff of the 20s. The book is probably the least reliable source I have ever encountered. 1950s biographies and reporter memoirs are just notorious for being ridiculously unreliable. This one gets known facts wrong at just about every turn. Whether McGurn was actually an owner of the place or not is not really that well established. He was a hitman for Capone, eventually shot down in a bowling alley himself by gangsters who may have blamed him for the St. Valentine's Day massacre. And part of the reason we think they blamed him is after he was shot down, they left a valentine at his feet reading, "You've lost your jewel, you've lost your dough, your jewels and handsome houses, but things could still be worse, you know. You haven't lost your trousers." You can see why these guys, I don't know, I don't think they actually wrote the Valentine out themselves, but whoever wrote this was probably not making much of a living as a poet. Some people said that the trousers thing means that it was a reference to Joe Louis, that it was all really a revenge for what had happened to him because of a hit tune of his called Sam, You Made the Pants Too Long. I don't happen to have a copy of Sam, You Made the Pants Too Long. But really, Joe Louis didn't really start singing that until years after he was killed. Just down the road a little bit. Remember I got towed for filming this footage? The Lincoln Park Pirates got me while I was filming this. But just down the road is the Uptown Theater. Just about every year there's some new news saying it's going to reopen now. We're going to get it reopened. So far, it has not happened. Now, one tidbit about it is back in the 1950s, they used to film the game show Queen for a Day here. That was a show that would bring on a few women and they would tell their sob stories and people would decide who of them had the worst life so they could give them cash and prizes. It was possibly the tackiest game show ever put on. It lasted all through the 1960s. There was a brief revival in 1970 and even one in 2004, just briefly, hosted by Monique. We'll move a little bit further south down here through Uptown and come to the Clifton Art Corridor with some terrific murals, starting with this Wile E. Coyote one. We've seen a couple of this guy's art. He does Wile E. Coyote all over town. And leading to a lasso to snatch unsuspecting passersby. But really, this is the opening of the Clifton Avenue Art Corridor, kind of a hidden art gallery of murals within the city. I'll try to cover them as we go. This is behind here. This is Street Queen by Rodney Duran. How Will You Rise by Jenny Vyas. Get a better shot of that. I love Jenny Vyas's work. Instantly recognizable. For the Bears Fans by Liz Flores. Matter of Time by Mosher Gray. Busy Bots by Kyle the Creator. And these two are Reflections by Daniel Wilson. Koi by Jeremy Novi. Let's get a better shot of that here. The poi proceed down to there. This is Bison by Rodney Duran. Very stylized version of a bison. Angels on the Ground by Jazz On. Reminds me of Professor Coldheart. Inhale, Exhale by David Heo. Cool thing on the back of an Irish pub. This is Garden Hope by Anthony Lewellen. We've covered a lot of Anthony Lewellen on Mural Mondays. Those of you new here, every Monday morning we go out and see a mural someplace in Chicago for the morning mini tour. Anthony Lewellen. You can almost just recognize him by the color palette, really. See it a bit further down here. This is such a cool street to just discover. You might remember the morning mini tour we accidentally walked into this place. You can see a bit of the 3-panel Charlie Chaplin mural coming up here. This is Ode to the Bike Messenger by Brett Whitaker. And a Chaplin mural by Michelle Little, celebrating the fact that Chaplin worked for a while at S&A Studios. Of course, we've been covering, we just covered silent film in Chicago last weekend. This is All Together Now by Molly Z. All right, but moving on to Chaplin, which I think they've cleaned up the tag on that one now. But it's so much negative space. It's just a magnet for taggers. But right around the corner from here, really, was the old S&A Studios. Well, that's the wrong buttons. Okay. Where St. Augustine College is now on Argyle, this was S&A Studios, the old silent film studio. And just up the road back on Broadway, we just showed this last week, so I won't linger too much here. But just up the road is this old, what was called a Tide House. It was a pub that was tied to one particular brewer. You could get a Schlitz here and nothing else. Currently a restaurant, but this was known as a hangout for the silent movie people back at S&A. You can see the Schlitz sign up on the side there. Now, Chaplin himself used to gamble here. During lunch breaks, he would gamble to get other people to pay his check for him. One thing everybody from S&A remembered from Chaplin's 3-week stint here was how incredibly cheap he was. One person who worked with him says, "I can tell you this, Charlie still has the first nickel he ever made." That's why a lot of the stories about him buying property all over Uptown and having lived in pretty much every building in Uptown. If you go for an apartment here, it's a strange noise back there. Okay, Miles is okay. All right. Hope the house isn't falling apart. If you try to get an apartment in Uptown, there's about a 50% chance they told you that Charlie Chaplin used to live there. Really, he just lived at Bronco Billy's apartment, which was just down over kind of by the Aragon, just up the road from here. We'll move up Sheridan a little ways to cover one of the other actresses who worked for S&A and Sea League Polyscope, the other big studio at the time, currently sitting empty behind. This is something they've done quite a bit on Sheridan. They take these apartments and kind of retrofit the first floor into retail. But as of the 1970s and 80s, this was the home of Romola Remus. You can see her here playing Dorothy in the Fairy Log and Radio plays, a 1907 series of Oz shorts that were in color and that L. Frank Baum would interact with on stage. She was the first to play Dorothy in a movie. Now, she had a career working with quite a lot of them. She remembered years later that she loved working with Ben Turpin, who was one of the first stars they had at S&A, and often worked with Kathleen Williams, who was in the Adventures of Kathleen serials. That's her opening letter from her father here. She tended to play Kathleen's daughter. Kathleen was also one of the first movie stars to say that what she really wanted to do was direct. And she did, too. She wasn't the first woman to direct a silent film or anything, but she was one of the first anyway. Romola Remus herself spent years living in this apartment teaching piano in her old age. She actually, as a young woman, she had written the Romola Waltz, which I've not been able to get a copy of, but I know it's out there. Incidentally, her father was George Remus, a known bootlegger who in the 1910s had been a famous criminal lawyer in Chicago. That's him with Louise Lindlof, the crystal ball killer. And there's Romola as an adult, testifying in her father's behalf after he accidentally shot his wife to death, Romola's stepmother. Now, people sort of rediscovered Romola in the 1980s. She started making appearances. I know she was at the Wizard of Oz Club convention here in Chicago that I spoke at myself a few years ago. There are a couple of pictures of her. And they had a parade. It was the first to play Dorothy. Now, here's another cool thing that I thought. That's her house on the right, just next to her, the Emerald Tower. She actually lived at the Emerald City. I couldn't have made that up if I tried. Let's move just down the road and across the street from here. This cool old house, currently a lawyer's office. But this was the old McCready Funeral Home. And you can see a little bit of the detail still in touch. If you look up underneath the circular thing, you can see an M right there, still left over from when it was the McCready Funeral Home. Now, the McCready Funeral Home is probably best known as the place where John Dillinger's funeral was held. John Dillinger, of course, was the most notorious bank robber of 1934, in an era of notorious bank robbers. But after getting a hot tip from the woman in red, Anna Sage, who ran a bordello that he frequented, the cops shot him to death in an alley outside of the Biograph Theater, and that's where the story gets a little bit weird. He was first taken to the morgue, where this famous photograph was taken. That's his arm under the sheet, bent by rigor mortis, though it does look as though he's awfully happy to be there on the slab. I love the kind of bemused look of the woman behind the guy in the straw hat there. But it fell into a bit of controversy because it was reported after the funeral, after he was taken to Indiana for burial, that at some point in the process, Dillinger's brain had been stolen. This became quite the story. Kay Hall, the Chicago Daily Times' ace reporter, wrote, "Dillinger's brain now resting in pieces. Just one thing is sure, outlaw's still dead." Now, at the time, she went and interviewed Ray McCready, who ran the funeral home, and he insisted that by the time the body was brought here, the brain was already gone. Kind of hard to imagine how he would have found that out. We'll move a little bit further up here. Or just a little further down to 5510. This was a theater called the Renaissance, an apartment building called the Renaissance, still called the Renaissance. Now, as of 1935, there was a guy named Harry Tague living here. He was a manager of the Bryn Mawr Theater right around the clock, and one day he got a phone call threatening to bump him off because he had just ratted on a guy who had robbed the theater. He had gone to the police and said, "Yes, I can tell you, that's the guy." Right after he got the phone call, he looked down and saw a whole crowd of people walking up to the apartment. He thought, "Oh no, that's it, they're coming to get me right now." But really, they were just coming to tell him that the theater had just been shot up as a warning. Nobody was hurt, they just fired a few bullets into him to let him know that he was serious. Now, they eventually caught the alleged killer, a guy by the name of Bruno Austin. He was captured. He was also wanted for complicity in a big kidnapping case with the Ma Barker gang. He was arrested while leaving his own wedding. He was walking back down the aisle with his new bride. The cops came up and arrested him. The woman said, "I promise I'll stay with you. This wasn't her ideal honeymoon, but she promised to beat the charge." And he did beat the charge in court, but then 6 months later was sentenced to life for murdering a guy during a grocery store holdup back on Taylor Street. Now, in 1947, somebody else admitted that he had been the shooter and not Bruno Austin in that case. So, after over a decade in prison, he was freed. As of 1948, he was rumored to be studying for the priesthood. So I'm guessing the marriage didn't end up working out in the end. That's just one of a number of interesting gang murder stories up in the neighborhood here. If we go down to Carmen Avenue, this is a place that I can't really show you the original anymore. The original building seems to be long gone. But in February 24, there was an apartment here that was the home of a guy by the name of John Duffy and his girlfriend, Maybelle. Now, John Duffy had been brought into the Dino Banyan gang in early 1924, probably late 1923. He had been bragging to everybody about what a good hitman he was, how much he loved shooting people. O'Banion brought him in for this purpose, but then he never actually did anything, never actually shot anybody, just made a whole lot of talks. Then February of 1924, his body was found in a snowdrift down near 63rd Street. He had been picked up outside of Al Capone's Four Deuces Club on 2222 South Wabash and taken for a ride. He is often said to have been the first recipient of what came to be known as the one-way ride. Once they found the body, they busted into the apartment and found the dead body of Maybelle, his girlfriend/wife. Now, police interviewed the neighbors and said that Maybelle could outdrink anyone and still act like a dignified lady. Every gangster in town seemed to be a suspect. Months had gone by, he hadn't killed the people O'Banion wanted to. The story went that he had accidentally, in a drunken rage, possibly killed Maybelle. Called O'Banion begging for help. O'Banion saw an opportunity to get rid of this guy. Said, yeah, go get picked up outside of Capone's place so it'll look like he's in trouble. And then we'll just take you for a ride and get this all taken care of. So they did, in fact, talk to Al Capone about this, the manager of the Four Deuces, the most despicable resort ever kept anywhere. I believe this was around the time he said something like, I'm just a businessman, and for no reason at all, everybody is always trying to drag me into something. The story got weirder and weirder the more they researched it. They put out this entire thing saying at least what the place looked like. You can see the kitchen, untouched lunch laid for two. Living room where Mrs. Duffy's body was found with a bullet hole in the wall. Booze bottles, glasses, and cigarettes sitting right over there. Now, in September, a few months after this, the Coroner Wolf, actually announced that the whole thing was really not gangsters taking him for a one-way ride. It was a cop who killed him. Now, there was a cop operating under the name Leo O'Neill, who had been arrested as a bootlegger in the summer of 1924. Now, according to Coroner Wolf, what really happened with this murder was Duffy had killed Maybelle, freaked out and needed some money, so he tried to rob a garage full of bootleg whiskey that happened to be owned by Officer O'Neill. And O'Neill's men had seen him there, shot him down, and then dumped the body someplace. Whether this was actually true or not, it was reported in a couple of papers. The stories seemed to make sense, but he had his dates a little bit wrong. The garage had been raided, but not until a couple of weeks after Duffy was already dead. By then, O'Neill was already in jail as a bootlegger anyway. But we're going to move just a little ways down Carmen Avenue. Where there is a house currently being restored by one of my favorite architects. Couldn't get a great shot of it at the time. But this is what it currently looked like, which was underneath all of the construction. It's all metal. It's a very weird looking house, but Bruce Goff was a very weird architect. This was remodeled to look like this by Goff for a guy named Myron Bachman, who ran the radio recording studios. They recorded things like air checks, guys saying, "This is the theater of the air." And I couldn't find anything about like great jazz bands playing here or anything. But this is how it looked at one point. Bruce Goff was the kind of guy who designed things like this in the 1950s. Now, in the 1950s, everybody else was doing modernism, plain black rectangles. Bruce Goff was designing stuff like this. He's a part of my Graceland Cemetery tour now. There was just a big retrospective of his work at the University of Oklahoma, which he was teaching at in the 1950s. They fired him when they found out that he was gay. So I think maybe the retrospective is just trying to make things right. People would ask Bruce Goff about his influence, and he would never talk about other architects. He would talk about classical composers and things. At the time, internationalism was coming up where they were making a big show of all of the structure, and he said, well, I know structure can be beautiful, but the human body is beautiful, a skeleton is beautiful, but do you want to shake hands with one? It's a great line. So much great architecture here in Uptown as well. One of the more famous is the Bell Shore Apartments, 1928 and 1929 by Kennysburg and Westfield. It's still apartments to this day. We'll move in here and get a little bit more detail. I love that it's green. I love when they'd have interesting colors for buildings besides just the usual brick colors and glass colors. Blue buildings, green buildings, with these terrific Art Deco details. Such a cool place. Now part of the Bryn Mawr Historic District. And just down the block from there, well, across the street from it is the Bryn Mawr Apartments, which I don't have footage of, but it's by Alexander Levy, who we talked about on the morning mini tour yesterday. Same guy who did what is now the Century Theater on Clark down in Lakeview. But this is the Manor House Apartments, 1908, designed by J.E.O. Pridmore, who is better known for theaters than he is for houses. And these were high-grade luxury apartments in 1908. In particular, they talked about having these things on the sides that they called the orangeries. They're usually known as solariums, but I guess in French they were called in French, or at least according to him, it was the orangerie. This is what one of the floor pans looked like back when they were really big luxury places. And they still look really cool on the inside. They've now been broken into condos. There's 16 condo units in the building. And as of 2019, they were running about 400 to 600,000. And if that's too much for you, we can go down the block to the Edgewater Beach Apartments. This awesome pink building designed by Marshall and Fox, better known for the Drake Hotel, which was part of the complex of the old Edgewater Beach Hotel. You can see the apartments would have been a little bit north of this, but this in the 1920s was one of the most famous resorts in Chicago before they extended Lakeshore Drive. Now today where the water is here is Lakeshore Drive. Once they had expanded that, it wasn't quite the draw as a resort hotel as it had been before. But it was very opulent on the inside. A lot of the great jazz bands played there. It was one of those places where a lot of people just lived there. It was a whole community with legends unto itself. Still a landmark in Edgewater history. They tore down the hotel years and years ago. It's all been rehabbed it all went co-op in 1949, these places. Made the Register of Historic Places in 1994. And it is all condo now. And it's really remarkably affordable when I looked it up. You could get a 2,000 square foot place for under $290. But then the HOA fees are $1,800 a month. That's what kills you every time looking at places like this in Chicago. The HOA fees are just crushers. While we're finishing out in Uptown, we'll just move quickly up through the big landmark of Uptown that I hit the most, Graceland Cemetery. And if we're just going to do the highlight of Graceland Cemetery, it almost has to be the Eternal Silence statue by Laredo Taft. Built with money from the will of a guy named Henry Graves, usually said to be the grave of Dexter Graves, Henry's father. Dexter had been dead for like 75 years when this thing was built. And for a good 20 years, by the time Graceland was even opened, he was moved here in 1873, though I very much doubt there was very much left to move by then. But this is a statue called Eternal Silence, sometimes known as the Statue of Death by Laredo Taft. Legend has it that if you look into its eyes, you will see your own death. But its eyes are closed, so you can't really look into the eyes very well. Once again, I could go on. There's entire tours. Hopefully we'll be able to start walking tours at Graceland in just a couple of weeks. I'm just waiting on a couple of scheduling things. My schedule this time of year tends to be a little bit wonky. But all right, everybody. I want to plug some of the upcoming events before I put the Benny Goodman back on. Thursday, I will be out of town, but I have rigged it up so it should air a surprise presentation anyway. So if you still want to log in on Thursday at 8 like we always do, I should be here. I won't really be here. I'll be at a Bob Dylan concert at the time, but something will broadcast for you guys. Then Sunday morning, a week from today at 10 a.m., we will do the virtual boat ride once again for all the people who've been watching the quick clips of me on TikTok. Then Thursday morning, a week from this Thursday, publishing way out ahead now, H.H. Holmes, The True History of the White City Devil. I realized I haven't done that one in like 6 months now. It's really kind of my signature piece. But all right, everybody, so that's what's coming up around here. Should you need a Mysterious Chicago t-shirt for the new weather, including one with that Dillinger headline, or one with the Dead Ringers who entertained us on Thursday night at the virtual time travel pub crawl, or just the Mysterious Chicago logo, cafepress.com/Mysterious Chicago has everything you need. And with that, everybody, I will just put the Benny Goodman back on, and we will hang out like we always do. You know, we don't have to make this big. I'll make it a little smaller. Now, you all know where the buttons are there. So thanks a lot to everybody who is putting in donations, or everybody joining the Patreon especially. That's the best thing that you can do. And with that, thanks for joining me. I'm glad you enjoyed the tour. Here is Benny Goodman live at the Congress Hotel. Thanks, Shannon. Thank you, Spencer. Hey, Dina, thanks, Chuck. I'm sure I will. Ein Bed Ma, Lisa. Which I understand nobody actually uses in Hebrew, but that's how they teach you in Duolingo. Thanks, Marita. Thanks, Amy. We'll find, I know where Miles is right back behind over here. Hoodies with hoods. Gene says that you can quiet a donkey by getting it a stablemate. Got it? Thanks, Spencer. Hey, Paulette. Gary, that's good to know. Thanks, Susan. Thanks, Don. Thanks, Gene, over on Twitch. Thanks, Amy. You want to help me keep these going on the same schedule that we got? Just hit one of these donate buttons. Laura, the first walking tour, maybe the first week of April. I'm just waiting to hear from Netflix on whether I have to go to LA for a weekend. But my schedule just gets so tricky in spring overall. Heather, there'll definitely be a new thing for there will definitely, I should get some home merchandise. There'll definitely be a new con stuff, but it's still pretty early. Oh yeah, set your DVRs for I Was There tomorrow on the History Channel. I did a couple of episodes of that show. Spencer and I was an English major who kind of snuck into this stuff through the back door. Laura, I imagine the first walking tour will be at Graceland. That's kind of my home base. Hello, Brandy.
And that would put rhythm in the feet of a wooden Indian. That was the bugle call rang, Benny Goodman's own arrangement. Now,
I don't know if I've ever been called Boo before. That's nice. Whoa, okay, while I was running, my latest TikTok got 25,000 views. That's nice. But now it seems to have, my comments seem to have frozen here. I'm going to turn it on here. It's yesterday's. Okay, thanks, Elaine. Thanks, Heather. Susan, I might just be doing some more Talking Head stuff for another show. Thanks, Ava. Thanks, Ava. Yeah, this TikTok is the new one I did about the Dews Mansion. This took off way more than I expected. Monica, don't worry if you missed it. As soon as we log off here, it'll be up on the videos page. Spencer, that's rough. All right, let me go get Miles. Miles, your public has been awaiting you. You want to come say hi to everybody? Spencer, there might well be if there was an arrest. Depending on what year it was. If it's after 1929, it's easier to get. The Daily Times was more likely to cover it than anybody else. Ah, Chris, I'm glad to hear that. The comments are very amusing on that one. I mean, if they watch me on Passover and think, well, Heyman lives rent-free in your brain, huh? You've got Heyman derangement syndrome. I'm going to try to put Miles back on the couch now, but he'll quite likely come back over. And if you're digging the music, one record I cannot recommend enough, Blue Rose, Duke Ellington with Rosemary Clooney, never gets old, this album. Okay, I'm gonna check the comments on the Dues Mansion one to see if anybody could tell me whether in fact he was the
Benny Goodman presents On the Alamo.
Okay, somebody seems to know a bit more about George Santo Pietro on there, but isn't really saying much other than I left out a lot. Well, yeah, it's a TikTok, man. Okay, this is a comment from Miles that I'm putting in right there. Spencer, off the top of my head, that doesn't ring a bell, but I must have read about it at some point. I'm not really a Ripper expert. I just get kind of drawn into Ripper stuff now and then. Jackie, Miles is only 3. He hasn't learned to read yet. But here he is. Miles, they're all telling you how famous you are. Here's his response: Durfstu. He loves to get on keyboards, but he hasn't written the complete works of Shakespeare yet. Eventually, though, I always like Letterman's line about that. You know, if you could get 1 million monkeys typing in 1 million typewriters, the smell in that place would be horrendous. Where is Priya? Priya is probably sleeping in bed with Ronnie right now. Look at Miles, you're in HD. You're broadcasting in HD. 1080i or 1080p, I forget. The rest of my afternoon is trying to figure out this new plugin I got on the website to get it to set my correct time. It's listing all the upcoming events, but it also said they took place at like 3 a.m., so it's something wrong in the time zone there, and I can't figure out how to fix it. I cycle through a lot of plugins these days.
Eeny, meeny, miny, mo, and we stay right in the urban room of the Congress Hotel in Chicago and dance some more to Benny Goodman and his orchestra, and hear Helen Ward sing Eeny, meeny, miny, mo.
Oh, this is my guy. Anytime you hit CAM, I'd be like... I'm a morning person, not a night person. I hate that about myself, but I am. Miles, what are you up to? Don't knock stuff off the wall, please. Who's my favorite person to study in all of Chicago history? Asked Spencer. Right now it's Johann Hawk. I wish I could do something more with Johann Hawk. Kathy, that's the one. You guys will have to tell me how it is. I had to go to Minnesota to film that one, but I got to see the mall from Mallrats. Leave it everywhere, let it go, let it fly away. Spooky to check out near the Fairmount Millennium Park. Off the top of my head, easiest is to go down to the Congress. But also make sure you check out the drawing room at the Athletic Association building. I don't know about the Fairmount offhand. There's probably something. Miles. Yeah, come to them live in HD, Miles. Yep, I got him up. Miles.
And we'll let the title speak for itself. Benny Goodman presenting Madhouse.
Oh yeah, I brought this on myself. I know that. I see you, Kristen. Miles. Miles. Guys playing hide from Miles today. Spencer, H-O-C-C-H. H-O-C-H. He's a guy who I don't think has ever been really properly studied. There's one book about him, but it's not good. Yeah, Miles. Let them all see how cute you're being right here. Well, this would be so easy if you would stay in one place. I guess I'm one to talk. Uh-oh. Okay, guys, I think I probably better... It's any minute now, Miles is going to hit the button to stop streaming, so I think I probably better stop on my own. Once again, thanks to everybody who's hitting the donation buttons over there. Upcoming tours. Our surprise for you guys on Thursday. Next Sunday will be a virtual architectural boat tour, and Thursday after that, H.H. Holmes, The True History of the White City Devil. So thanks a lot for joining me, everybody. I'm Adam from Mysterious Chicago Tour, saying to stay safe, stay strong, and if you can, stay spooky, everybody.